million girls. And now with my loving arms around you, honey, I can stand up and face the world. Let me tell you, your love keep on lifting me higher, higher and higher. And I said your love keep on lifting me higher and higher. Oh, now suck it. Oh, lift me up, oh. Keep my love going higher and higher. I said keep on lifting. Lift me up, mama. Keep on lifting higher and higher.
Can you hear your mama calling? Your mama wants you back. Can you hear your mama crying? You're the best thing she ever had. What I say? Your mama wants you back. Your mama wants you. Oh, I want you, baby. I want you. Can you hear your mama singing? She's just singing about her man. Can you hear your mama pleading? I'm trying to do the best I can without you. Your mama needs you back. Your mama needs her daddy. Oh, I need you, daddy. I need you. Can you hear your mama calling? She's a calling you on the phone. Can you hear your mama crying? A girl just said you weren't at home. Melody, your mama's hurting bad. Your mama wants her papa. Oh, papa, I want you, I want you, I want you so bad. Your mama wants you back. Your mama wants you. Your mama wants you back. Your mama loves you. Your mama wants you back. Your mama can't live without you. Your mama wants you back. Your mama, well, I need you. Your mama wants you back. Your mama can't do without you. Your mama wants you back. Your mama, well, I need ya. Your mama wants you back. Your mama can't live without ya. Your mama wants you back. Your mama, yeah, she loves ya, she loves ya. Your mama wants you back. Your mama wants ya. Your mama wants you back. Your mama loves ya. Your mama wants you back. Your mama.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are so excited to have you here to Live Curious, Go Beyond 2021. Can you believe it? We finally made it, February 20. Our goal, go global, go virtual. We had no idea how many people are going to show up, and we are so excited to welcome over 1,500 people to this event. Coming from over 60 different countries. We are so excited. And again, we wanted to go virtual, go global, and I think our team nailed it. So congratulations to everyone. Before we get started into Will's keynote, I want to make sure that we take a moment, since this is our only session that we have with everyone, just to give a moment of thanks. So I have a lot of people to thank. This is no small feat to get this event off the ground. So first, I want to thank our superstar organizing committee, Deanna, Doug, and Floren, for their amazing work over the last 6 months. We weren't sure if we were going to pull this off back in September, and it's been their amazing work that got this done. We want to thank the leadership team from the American School Foundation Monterrey, particularly Dr. Adams, for their unwavering support of this event. It started 7 years ago with PD Day, and here we are with 1,500 registrations. Thank you, Dr. Adams. Also, I want to thank our ASFM communications department, as well as our Live Curious communication team of McCoy, Ana Paula, and Jose for all of their work. Graphics you see, everything you see today, they had a hand on. I want to thank our we have simultaneous translation today. So if you are in the Zoom webinar, you can actually choose your audio feed, Spanish or English. But I want to thank Efren, our interpreter. I thank our two amazing featured presenters, Will Richardson, Ewan McIntosh, who are giving up the time on a Saturday to help us figure out this pandemic education and post-pandemic work. I want to thank over the 40 staff volunteers from ASFM that are going to be the room facilitators. They're attending, they're presenting, they're sharing. So thank you to them for all of that. We couldn't do it without you. For our presenters, Live Curious has always been by teachers for teachers. And so it takes a certain level of vulnerability to come to a conference. When we said we have 1,500 people, that takes an extra level of vulnerability. So thank you to all our presenters for putting themselves out there and sharing. Most importantly, we also want to thank you, our Live Curious community. This has always been an event where we are proud to feature the practices of educators working with kids every day. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of special members of our Live Curious community, Brian and Corey, two former Eagles who paved the way and helped found this event. I know you're here today, so thanks again for getting us started and getting this ball rolling. Finally, a big thank you to our sponsors. We usually have 8 to 10 sponsors, but people didn't know what to do with the virtual conference in the pandemic, and these folks stuck with us. ASFM, Naval EA, and Tri Association. They're the reason this event has been able to be free, and so big thank you to them for giving access and just living the vision of Live Curious, so thank you to them. Some housekeeping matters. First of all, we do have a help desk and a virtual cafe. If you go to the Live Curious website, just click on that. It'll put you into a Zoom room with us. If you have any questions, drop in. If you want to say hi, drop in. If you're lonely during the pandemic, drop in. You get to speak to somebody else and we can help you. Also, the virtual cafe, big plug. Live Curious is all about connecting. So we want to make sure that you all are able to connect with each other. So if you're in a session with your colleagues or somebody you just met and you're like, I want to take this idea deeper, further, farther. If you want to get some traction with that idea, we want to put you in the virtual cafe. Come drop in, we'll give you a room, keep the work going. This is your conference, your experience. So use that. We will have some social media contests. We have some fun contests for you. So make sure you are either following us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. This is also where if there is an internet outage somewhere in the world, the presenter will update session information and so forth. So make sure you're on our social media platforms and following us. But let's have some fun and participate. Building community is always a big part of Live Curious, so please make sure you do that. A few reminders. Virtual rooms are going to open 5 minutes prior to the session start time, so just hang out and chill in the waiting room until that happens. The links to virtual rooms were in the emails you received on Thursday and Friday. They are not on the website. You had to register to be able to attend, so you should have gotten those emails. Again, if you did not, either send an email right now to livecurious@asfm.edu.mx or just jump in the help desk and we'll help you. And so there's the website. You can get all the other information if you're looking for session descriptions, handouts, resources. It is all there. So do that. I do want to give a little plug for the Live Curious community. It is a special community. And so I want to talk a little bit about it and what it has to offer. First thing today, prepare to be uncomfortable. We have gotten presenters here that are going to push your thinking. We're not going to talk about the, everything is great, everything is wonderful kind of things. We want to talk about how we make it better tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So we're going to push your thinking. Be ready to get uncomfortable. If you get a few butterflies in your stomach, we're probably doing a good job. It's an unconference mindset. So if you don't like something, go to something else. Don't just hang out for hangout's sake. No one's taking attendance. So just go where you need to be to learn the most for you today. Get in the game. Once you connect with something, participate, get in the chat, find other people, share ideas. This is a participatory event. We want you to participate, get your hands dirty, share your knowledge. So get in the game. That's going to be hard to do during our keynote just because we're live streaming that. But in the sessions, just jump in there and do that work. Remember, it's teachers for teachers. So connect, right? That's what we're all about. And it's all about traction with new ideas. So find a way to connect to something, take it back to your school. We want learning to be better for your students next week. And then we're going year round. Live Curious started as a one-day, half-day PD. Then we made it a 2 or 3 day conference with a pre-conference, but now we're going to go year round. So we'll be leaking some One Best Thing videos on our social media feed. We're going to be sponsoring a Live Curious chat once a month on Twitter. So if you know about Twitter chats, follow us on Twitter and you'll get all that information. We'll be publishing in March a silver lining white paper talking about the things we learned from the pandemic and how we keep those really good things present out of this science sprint run by Ewan McIntosh. And then also on the Live Curious Go Beyond YouTube channel, we will be publishing all of our sessions. So if you missed something or you're torn between two, go there and you'll be able to see the sessions live. Well, not live, recorded, I guess. Live recorded. So now, without further ado, are you ready to get this party started? Who better to kick off a conference about being curious than one of the founders of the Big Question Institute? Our keynote speaker has spent 22 years in public schools. Just like us, he is a practitioner. In the last 15 years, he's been spent challenging the status quo. We're all part of it. We have to own it as a thinker, writer, blogger, influencer. He looks at the intersection of online social networks, education, and systemic change, because we want to change the system, make it better for kids. Will Richardson was named a top 100 global change maker in education by the Finnish organization 100 Ed. He was listed by Forbes as one of the top 5 entrepreneurs to follow. His TED Talk entitled his TED Talk called "The Surprising Truth About Learning in Schools" has over 250,000 views. I wish I had that. And our keynote speaker knows how to live curious. He knows how to help us go beyond. Are you ready to be disrupted? Offering his keynote address today, now is no time to go back to normal in schools. Please welcome Mr. Will Richardson to our Zoom room. Will, I'm going to stop sharing and it is all yours.
Well, thanks so much, Sasha, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. That's kind of the greeting that we have in this Zoom moment that we're living in right now. It is my great pleasure to get a chance to spend the next 45 minutes or so with you. And as Sasha mentioned, I feel like my role is to provoke this morning, to maybe get you a little bit uncomfortable. That's where I think we need to be, hopefully not too uncomfortable, but this is a moment where I think we need to begin thinking really hard about what we're doing in education, how it fits with the world that we're in today. And so I want to push your thinking. I want to take you on a little bit of a journey where we explore what normal is for schools and what we might do from this moment moving forward to begin to reimagine that and to begin to rethink that a little bit, because it is a time to do that. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Now, one of the things about Zoom that is very difficult for presenters is that, normally I can look out into the audience and I can see the energy of the people out there. I can see the way that, they're responding to the words that I'm saying. And I just, I get a lot of energy back from that. But in Zoom, obviously, I can't see you. I am actually watching the chat over here on YouTube. So hopefully I'll get a little bit of feedback from there. But what I want to ask you to do, just so I get a sense of where you're at as we start this, I want you to go over to a site called Menti, menti.com. And when you get there, you'll see that there's a little form where you can put in a number, and the number that I'd like you to put in is that number right there, 5639748. You can do this on your phones, you can do these on your computers, you can do it from wherever you have access. And basically, I want you to give me one word that captures your feelings about education in schools in this moment. Just one particular word that kind of gives me a sense of where your headspace is at right now. I think obviously there's been so much that's been happening. I'm going to switch my other computer over here so I can hopefully watch those as they come up. There's been so much that's been happening over the last 12 months or so that we're kind of all over the place. And it's been challenging, it's been frustrating, it's been tiring. Basically, it's also been, if we can step back from it, somewhat interesting and exhilarating as well. So I want to get a sense, if you can go ahead and do that, and hopefully that's working for everyone. And I know that there's a little bit of delay in terms of what I'm presenting and what you're seeing in terms of what's on screen. So I'll check back there in a minute just to get some sense as to what it is that you're thinking. So I want to introduce you, if you haven't seen it already, to a new book that my really good friend and partner, Homa Tavangar, and I put out about a few weeks ago now. And it's titled 9 Big Questions Schools Must Answer to Avoid Going Back to Normal, because normal wasn't that great to begin with. It's a free download, and there's a link there that we hope you'll go and check that out. I'm going to touch on many of the themes that are in that book. I'm going to try to expand on them a bit. And I want to also just do a little bit of a deep dive into these questions in a moment. We do think this is a moment of inquiry, obviously, which is why we called it the Big Questions Institute. We think that there are lots of existential questions that we have to be asking right now. And that we can't shy away from those because basically this is the moment for us to begin to interrogate many of the challenges and many of the opportunities that we're looking at that are new. Obviously, over the last few months, we've had a lot going on, and I think that when you look at just even what's been happening in the United States, it's been very, very difficult. This has been really hard. There's no question about that. So, you know, just as a reminder, in case anyone wasn't paying attention, which I'm pretty sure everybody was, but we've had this pandemic thing that's been happening, and that's obviously changed a lot of the way we think about the world, the way we interact in the world, the way we interact with one another, the way that we think about the future. I think there's no question that this will be one of the defining moments of our lifetimes, and that we're still living through it. And that's unquestionably something that's been challenging and on our minds quite a bit. We're in the middle of another pandemic, and that is the pandemic of racial and social injustice in the world. It's not just in the United States, but certainly that was something that came to a head last summer. And it continues today in the States, but it continues around the world. The response to the George Floyd killing from all parts of the globe was powerful. And it signaled that we are in a very kind of interesting moment when it comes to our reckoning with race and with injustice. And that is a story that is going to continue as well. In the States, we had a very contentious election, and it really highlighted certainly a lot of the populist kinds of pressures and challenges and trends that are happening in the world. It certainly exposed a lot of our issues in terms of literacy and in terms of the way that we communicate with one another, the way that we define truth. We are in what some people call an epistemic crisis, which is interesting to me as a former English teacher and journalist. I think that the search for truth and our ability to uncover it and name it is really important, obviously for democracy, but just for the way that we live. And then obviously it kind of blew up just about a month ago, a little over a month ago now in the States, with one of the probably darkest moments in our history. So there's been a lot going on. And then when you put on top of that, for all of us, this looming kind of environmental crisis that we're facing, It's a heavy, heavy moment. And I just want to acknowledge that. We have been living through something that is just incredibly challenging and very, very difficult. And you know what? We are all exhausted. And I totally understand that. I'm exhausted, but I'm not as exhausted, I know, as many teachers who are in schools, as many school leaders who I've been working with and talking to. The pressure and the challenges of trying to deal with all of that stuff into this moment is overwhelming. There was actually a survey that came out last week that asked teachers, describe your mental health, describe your health and well-being right now. And you look at these results, 45% of teachers said, I'm drained and exhausted. 17% said, I'm physically and mentally on the brink. 30% said, I'm just about coping. And 1% said, I feel great. So there is no question that for many of you who are watching me today, you're tired, and you should be. And the good news is that it looks like there may be a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, but the not so good news is that we're still not there yet. And certainly it's not just teachers that are dealing with this moment, but it's also students as well. I found this article really interesting from just the other day when people in Colorado are now suggesting we should probably do a mental health evaluation on all of our kids. There's trauma, there is stress, and it's certainly going to leave its mark on our children. And we have to begin to understand what the impacts of this time has been. And so we are looking at a really complex, challenging future here in the near term. And so I want to just invite all of you to kind of honor that for a second and just take a deep breath and just be with this moment, as challenging as it is. I'm going to talk a little bit at the end here about what we can do in terms of keeping our hope and keeping our optimism for what happens into the future. But let's just acknowledge this. This is really hard, what we've been through. And hopefully it is a once in a lifetime kind of confluence of things that are happening that are exhausting. There's no question. So if we can carve out the bandwidth, if we can get over our exhaustion a little bit, I do think that this is a moment where we need to begin to take stock. We need to begin to try as much as we can to step back a little bit from the intensity of this moment and try to ask some bigger questions. Try to really get a sense of what do we do when we move through this moment. I love this quote by Adrienne Marie Brown, where she says, things aren't necessarily getting worse, but they are getting uncovered. And we have to hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. We can't run from these challenges. I think we have to face them head on in ways that make sense to us, in ways that maybe are more intellectual than emotional. But we have challenges. And this moment is, in many ways, a moment of crisis. I think it's interesting, the characters that are used in Chinese to define crisis. There are there are two different characters. One means danger. And I think a lot of us feel danger. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much that we're not sure what's coming around the next corner. How do we deal with the kind of, again, existential pressures that we're feeling around what's happening in the world? But the other character is opportunity. And in crisis, there is opportunity. And I think, again, if we can kind of step back from it, we can look at this as an opportunity, as a time to explore, as a time to look at how we've changed, look at what's changed, and maybe think hard about what we need to change moving forward. This is a great quote by John Hagel. He says, what we need are narratives of explorers rather than narratives of true believers. The narratives of explorers emphasize the opportunity to learn and grow by constantly framing new questions and embarking on quests to gain new insight through action. And they focus on possibilities to be discovered rather than certainties to be recovered. And I love that last phrase. I love it because it really is about now, not how do we go back. It's not basically now that we are beginning to see this light at the end of the tunnel, now that The vaccinations are getting rolled out in some places, and certainly it's not an equitable rollout of vaccinations. But now that we kind of have a sense that we may be moving in the right direction, at least, the question becomes, will we choose to recover, go back, or will we choose to discover? And it's an interesting choice. In a health sense, I think we all need to recover. I think we all need to spend some time recovering. I loved an article that I saw the other day that the UK is talking about not a full summer of school, continuing school, but having a summer of play where we just go out and we just play, and we just try to let loose all of that stress and the anxiety and the angst that we've been carrying around. But the question is, are we going to go back to the way things were, or are we going to go forward? And then, the other question around that is, well, what does that even mean? I mean, what does it mean to go forward now? It's kind of an interesting question. What does that look like if we went forward into something different? I think there's real opportunity if we're willing to grapple with what that might be. And I think that there's a narrative and a story of school that is much more compelling, actually, than the one we're currently living. Now, I think in order to move forward, we have to be telling some truths about where we are now. I like to call these the unpleasant truths. I've been talking about these for a long time. And there are some real unpleasant truths about schools that are based on what most of us would think is just common sense, and in fact, uncommon sense when it comes to some of the things that we do in schools. So this is where it begins to get really challenging, right? This is where I want to push you. What if we've been deceiving ourselves in terms of what an education is? What if we've been not telling the truth about what we know in our heart of hearts school should be, and we've been living something else? We've been living something that we know probably isn't the story that is best for children in schools. So I want to just go through and talk a little bit about what normal is in schools, but I want to do it truthfully. I want to tell some truths here in terms of normal in schools. And this is hard, I think. And I don't think too many of you will push back against me when I go through this list of what normal is for children and for teachers in the schools that we currently have, by and large. Not in every school, but by and large. So normal in schools is a curriculum that's pretty much forgotten as soon as the test is over. And we all know this because we pretty much forgot most of what we learned in school as soon as the test was over. Normal is kids learning how to get a good grade over learning anything else. School is a game for many kids. I have 2 children. I watch them play the game. They learn to play it pretty well. And I think that's a truth that we pretty much have to accept at this point. The normal in school is that it's a lesson, not a discovery. It's pre-planned. It's something that basically is meted out, usually in lockstep, by a timetable, by a curriculum. It's a narrow kind of experience rather than something that is to be uncovered or discovered. Normal in schools is unnatural segregation by age. No one in the real world learns with just people their own age. That's not the way it works. That's a very limiting way of thinking about how learning might happen. Normal in schools is basically a bunch of chunks of times that just when we get going on something, we have to go do something else. And again, no one in the real world studies science for 45 minutes and then reads a book for 45 minutes and then, talks another language for 45 minutes. It doesn't work that way. It's not a great condition for learning. Normal in schools means a lot of inequity when it comes to access to modern tools. We saw this in the United States because of the pandemic. Kids doing their homework in the parking lots of McDonald's and of Chick-fil-A. And because they don't have Wi-Fi at home. Many kids who don't even have that type of access. And I know that that's the case around the world as well. Normal in schools are silos of knowledge that rarely connect. We have math class, then we go to history class, then we go to science class, then we go to something else class. And those things rarely overlap or interconnect. Again, not very real world when you think about it. Normal in schools is surveillance. We are collecting data, a lot of data on our children, and the pandemic has actually pushed that forward, where now we are collecting even much more data on our kids and our teachers. That's the normal state of affairs these days. Normal in schools is an emphasis on teaching, not learning. And that's not to disrespect teachers in any way, but it's a fact. We think hard about how we want to teach the curriculum. We don't think as hard about creating the conditions for learning in our classrooms, and that's a big distinction. Normal in schools is a lack of relevance to the modern world. I mean, there are so many things that kids need to be able to do and need to understand about this particular world that aren't in the curriculum, because the curriculum has pretty much been static for quite some time. It's changed a little bit, it's been tweaked a little bit, but there are so many things that are happening in the world right now that kids get no introduction to at all in schools. Normal in schools is basically white explorers, white scientists, white authors, and white histories. And that's just a fact. And again, as the world becomes more diverse, as we talk about equity, as we talk about social justice, that can't be normal any longer. That can't be something that we continue to maintain. Normal in schools is anxious, stressed, and depressed children. We have more kids now who are presenting with mental health issues than we've ever had in the past. It's an increasing illiteracy to recognize misinformation. And this is United States has been a test case over the last year. We struggle with trying to figure out what's true and what's not true. And I think that we have to own the fact that we don't do a great job of that in school. We tell kids that their worth is measured by the numbers that they get, by the college acceptances that they get. We have these kind of arbitrary measures of value. And finally, normal in schools is power over others rather than power with one another. It's a long list, and it's probably not even complete, but I don't think too many of you would push back on many, if any, of these. This is normal in schools. This is what kids experience and teachers experience every single day in most schools. And it's now to the point where we need to ask, why do we want to go back to that? Why do we want to return to that? And I want to just be really clear. I'm not saying that every aspect of school is something we should change. I mean, there is real value and real power in bringing children and adults together where they can be in the same space, and we can nurture kids and support them and help them, achieve greater heights than they could on their own, and to do great things in the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, and there are aspects of school. I don't want you to hear that I'm saying schools should go away. They absolutely shouldn't. But schools can't stay this way. We can't continue this definition of normal in schools if we're going to prepare kids for a world where the future is increasingly uncertain, where change is happening faster and faster, and where they're going to have to learn their ways through their lives. They're going to have to continually learn in order to thrive in the futures that are coming at them. Now, we want to go back to normal, and the pull back to the status quo is really strong. It's really, really strong. And the reason that it's so strong is that, number one, it's easier. It's easier just to go back to where we were. It's easier to have those same conversations and to do the same things that we've been doing. It's just more comfortable for us. It doesn't require us to really think deeply about our personal value, about the ways that the value that we bring to the interaction in schools. And it's what we know. We're good at it. I think, I remember when I was in the classroom, I thought I was a really good classroom teacher. And I was, given the definitions of what a classroom teacher was supposed to do at that point. But the way I think about it now, 15 years later, as I watch my kids go through school, as I've really thought deeply about what learning is and the conditions that we need that create learning, which I'm going to talk about here in a bit. I don't know if I was that great of a teacher. I think I was good for my kids. I cared for them. I wanted what was best for them. But in terms of preparing them for the worlds they were going to live in, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because this isn't the world that schools were built for. You know, schools were built for a time when teachers and knowledge and information were pretty scarce, and you had to go to school in order to learn algebra or French or whatever else. And now that's just not true anymore. Teachers and information and knowledge are everywhere if you have access. And I know that there is still a lot of inequity when it comes to access, but increasingly, we don't need schools for the same reasons that we needed them in the past. And I love this quote by Margaret Wheatley, where she says, you know, the world is now quite perplexing. We no longer live in those sweet, slow days when life felt predictable, when we actually knew what to do next. We live in a complex world. We often don't know what's going on, and we won't be able to understand its complexity unless we spend more time in not knowing. And what not knowing means is not going back to normal, because that's what we know. That's what we know. I think we have to steel ourselves to live in a moment now where we just have to get accustomed to not knowing. We have to think differently, and we have to explore to see what might be the possibilities out there instead of what we've had in the past. So welcome to a period of no normal. A lot of people are saying, you know, let's go back, or let's get what's the new normal going to be? What are we going to have in terms of normal? I'm going to argue the no normal is what's upon us here in this moment, and that we need to just be okay with that. I don't think we can be comfortable with it, nor do I think we should be comfortable with it. But I think we need to basically be okay with the fact that we don't know what normal is any longer. So how do we discover? I mean, how do we not simply recover, but how do we begin to move forward? And I think that there are 3 R's, and actually Homa and I are doing a workshop in this conference in this afternoon that we're really looking forward to, where we're going to talk about what we think the new 3 R's are for educators in this moment. And they are to, first of all, reflect on you know, where we've been, what this moment is all about, to reset, to interrogate what is it that we think is most important to keep about schools, but what is it also that maybe we can begin to think about not keeping, and then to reinvent in some hopefully creative and exciting and joyful ways what a new path forward might be. Now, I want to tell you a quick story about a group of people who have done just this, who are reflecting and resetting and reinventing. And some of you are on this call right now. This is a group of international school heads with the Association for the Advancement of International Education, AAIE. And I've been privileged, literally privileged, to spend almost a year now, every Thursday morning, getting together with them. It'll be a year and 2 weeks, actually, that we've been meeting every Thursday morning for an hour to just talk about the world and talk about the logistics of getting through this moment, but also to talk about our aspirations for what might come next and how we might move schools and the way we think about schools to a different place. I think that when I reflect on the work that these folks have done, and actually someone articulated this almost verbatim in a session we had a couple of weeks ago, this has probably been the most powerful learning in many ways that these folks have ever done. That's not to say they haven't learned a lot in their past lives, but this has been so intense and so kind of problem solving, inquiry based, and just, you know, minute by minute trying to figure out what to do next. And I think what people have learned in this group is that the one lesson from last year is that it's a reminder that deep and powerful learning, it only happens when it's relevant, when it's real world, when it's collaborative, when it's driven by inquiry and passion, and when it's shared transparently. And we talk about this in our book, that, you know, that those are the conditions for deep and powerful learning to happen and for learning to sustain. And that's what's been happening with this group. And what was interesting was there was a subgroup of them that said, you know what, let's get really focused on what do we want to build? Because we're kind of looking at what we have and we're thinking, we're feeling it's not really working for us. And I love this phrase, you know, if you don't like the road you're walking, start paving another one. And that's exactly what we've done. they've come together and they've created the AIE New School Project, where they have articulated 7 different principles, as to what they want to live in their schools. And they are principles around adaptive change, capacity, learning, community, well-being, evidence, and equity. And someone in our call yesterday actually said, it feels like a pledge, that this is our pledge. This is what we want to live. And so I use this as an example to say, this is the work. How do we begin to reflect? How do we begin to reset? How do we begin to reinvent? And that it's possible, and that it's happening, and that people are doing it, and that it's good work. It's exhausting, it's tiring. There's so much else going on, but it's really good work. And it revolves around 2, I think, really urgent questions for individuals and institutions that are important to ask right now. After what we've been through, who are we now as individuals? Who are we as teachers? And who are we as institutions and communities that serve children? And the other question then is, what do we want to become? Who do we want to become? This is an opportunity for us to reimagine our work, to look forward and say, yeah, we don't want to do this stuff any longer. We want to do something different. We want to do what we've known all along we should be doing in some cases, but never had the opportunity to do. And I think that that's the moment that we're trying to capture again in the book, that we offer up these 9 questions as ways for you to begin to think about, how do we move forward from this moment? Now, I love this quote by Peter Block about questions. And he says, questions that have the power to make a difference are ones that engage people in an intimate way, confront them with their freedom, and invite them to co-create a future possibility. And these 9 questions that we're asking do just that, we think. We think that they are intimate questions in many ways. We think that they are somewhat confrontational, though, because they force us to, again, speak truth and to think about where we're at, and also then to help us plan something, build something for the future. So just very briefly, we start with, what is sacred? And if you think about that question right now, even for 30 seconds, what is the most sacred aspect of school to you? Those are the things that we want to make sure we keep. And anything that doesn't end up on that list is something you need to be willing to put on a table and ask yourself, do we want to continue doing this? Do we want to continue doing this thing that we don't find sacred into the future? What is learning should be the easiest answer that we give as educators, and yet it's one of the most difficult questions that to arrive at coherence around. And it's a fundamental question for the work that we do. Where is the power? We have to interrogate power relationships in our schools right now. We have to understand who holds power, how it is wielded, and how we can begin to level those power relationships so that we have more agency and more equity and more opportunity and freedom to learn on our own, in our own way. Why do we do this? You can fill in the blank. If you want to do that in the YouTube chat, go ahead and do that. But why do we do this? Why do we group kids by age? Why do we separate disciplines out? Why do we do 45-minute chunks? Aren't there other ways to think about that? Who is unheard? There are a lot of people in our school communities that don't have voice in their own experience. And we have to make sure that we're listening to them, we're finding them, and that we're listening to them and bringing them to the conversation. Are we literate? Do we understand the way the world is operating right now? Do you understand how algorithms are in many ways dominating what you see, what you read, what you hear? Do you understand the different ways in which data and privacy and surveillance are being foisted on us? Issues around those things. We need to have a new sense of literacy for the world, because it's much different today from what it was, again, in the past. And are we okay? We need to take a real temperature check in this moment and just say, how are we? How are we doing? Are we well? Are we healthy? Physically, mentally, spiritually? And what do we need to do in order to get to the place where we are healthy in those ways? Because it's really hard to move forward if you're not healthy. Kids won't learn anything if they're not healthy in this moment. Are we connected? The world now is a place where connections are so important and so powerful. Just doing what we're doing right now is just an amazing thing when you think about it. I'm old enough to remember when this wasn't happening, when we couldn't do this. I'm old enough to remember a time before the internet. It's kind of amazing. Is it complex, and is it somewhat, crazy at times? Yeah, absolutely, it is. And we have to sort that out. But this is such a powerful affordance that I can sit here in New Jersey and speak to over 600 people from around the world, and to work with some of you more intimately later in the afternoon. It's a powerful thing, and we need to be connected, and we need to understand that. And then finally, we have to have some sense of what's next. We have to have an ability to read the signs. We should have known that this pandemic was going to happen. We had a lot of signs that, things were moving in that direction. We should have known that, what's happened in Texas. There were a lot of people who didn't read the signs, who didn't really look and think about what might happen and what might be possible, both in good and bad ways. So we need to have kind of a futurist mindset, a little bit, always kind of looking down the road and thinking, what might be coming, and how might we respond to those things, and how might we think about them? So yeah, it's a moment to reflect and to reset and to reinvent. So as I kind of come to the conclusion of this, I want to leave you with some thinking about how we move forward. How do we build the mindsets and the dispositions to move out of this challenging moment, to move out of this very heavy and exhausting moment, and build something new, to create a better or a different space for us to do our work in this thing we call school. How we create a different normal for the experience that we have with children. One of the quotes in one of the articles that has had a huge influence on us this year was an article by Arundhati Roy, who is an Indian novelist, and this was in the Financial Times, and you can find this. It's free to read. If you just type in "the pandemic is a portal." I mean, what an interesting metaphor. And the case that she makes here is that, we are at an inflection point, that we are moving from one world to another. In fact, instead of trying to kind of summarize it, I'll just give you this quote where she says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. And this one is no different. It's a portal. It's a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice, our hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world, and ready to fight for it, So the question becomes, what world in schools would you fight for? What kind of experience would you be willing to fight for in schools? And I think that that's a very interesting question. It's a powerful question. It's one that forces us to come to grips with the things that really matter, the things that we know make sense when it comes to learning, and to shed those things that don't make sense, to leave that baggage behind and to move toward a different space. Schools can be places of powerful learning, deep inquiry and agency, of equity, of relevance, of justice. We see schools that live many of those characteristics, but they're not in the mainstream. They basically are still kind of outliers on the edges. And schools are places where kids can do amazing work in the world, not just in classrooms, but amazing work that solve real problems, that engage with people in other places, that they learn and collaborate with one another around things that matter to them on their own terms. And schools can be places where kids and teachers, by the way, pursue their passions. I've seen schools where kids have 2.5 hours a day of time to simply pursue the things that they care about, to create things, to invent things, to collaborate with others and do things that they are invested in and that they care about really deeply. And finally, schools can be a place where we create new futures together with kids. One thing that we have to do in this moment is we have to make sure we're hearing the voices of our children. We have to make sure that we understand with empathy the lives that they are living right now and what they need. So much of schools is what we think they need or what we needed when we were in schools. But now is a time for us to dig deeply into the real lives of children and to try to sense what their futures are and ask them and have them talk about it, because they see the world differently from many of us. And it's an important perspective for us to bring to the table. There's no question. So I know that this is really a difficult moment. It's really hard, but we have to find ways of moving forward with hope and optimism. We have to be aware that this is an opportunity. This is a moment where we can create. It's hard. There are so many pressures on us. There are so many expectations from parents and policymakers and governments and whoever else to go back to the status quo. Many people want us simply to go back to normal. So we have to be able to push back against that and move forward with hope. And I love this quote by Mariame Kaba, who said, "Hope is a discipline. It's a commitment to the future that must manifest action." It's not enough to be hopeful. It's not enough to be simply optimistic. We must manifest action in this moment. We must do things. We must create things. That is our charge right now, more than ever because of this moment. There's an urgency for us to act and to do. And so I'd invite you to act with fearless inquiry. Don't be scared to interrogate, to tell truths, to really look deeply into your own personal understanding of school and education and learning, but also your institutional understanding of that, how it operates, how it works. I'd invite you to not just fix things that are wrong, but to imagine something different, to really push and design and think about what might be, not just go back and kind of tweak the things that we've been doing that may not be the best for kids or for ourselves when it comes to learning and preparing for the future. And then finally, find some people to journey with. And I'm going to invite you into the BQI community, which we've created for this work. We want to join with others who are serious and passionate about going there, going to those places that are hard, that are really difficult, that challenge us, but then that require us to build and create and design new things for schools and what might come in the future. So you can head on over to BQI community and see what we're doing there. And if you want to join us, that would be awesome. I'm going to leave you with a quote, and I want to thank you again so much to the organizers of Live Curious and for all of you who have taken some time to sit and hopefully not fall asleep on me today, but to engage in these ideas, which are really challenging. But I want you just to remember that your present circumstances don't determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. This is a very interesting, difficult, challenging starting point, but there is so much opportunity for how we can move this conversation forward, how we can move our schools forward to new heights of creativity, of joy, and of just learning in profound and important ways. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I sincerely appreciate it, and I wish you sincere good luck on your journey, wherever it may take you. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Will. Really appreciate those thought-provoking comments. Just a couple of things that really stood out to us here at the Live Curious headquarters. You know, thinking about, do we have the courage to imagine something different? And do we have the people? Do you have some people to build with? And I don't know if those of you, while Will was speaking, I dug out this image. Do you guys know this image? It's from a pretty famous YouTube video, right? It's not the first guy is just crazy. It's the second guy that starts dancing that makes it a movement. So do you have some people, you know, if you're by yourself, you might be seen by some people as being crazy. Find a couple of others and you're starting a movement. And Live Curious is all about starting a movement. So take Will's provocation, move that forward, take it into action as you go into the sessions, and ask those big questions to get us going. We are running on time, which again, for a virtual conference is amazing. So our next session is going to start, session 1 starts at 10:30 Central Standard Time or Mexico City time, depending on where you are in the world. That is approximately 39 minutes from now. Again, rooms will open 5 minutes early. Go to the website, go to the help desk, go to the Big Question Institute. If you are attending the design sprint, if you registered for that special experience, you've received a special email and you'll join UN at that same time. And then again, Will and Home will be running another design sprint in the afternoon. If you signed up for that, you also have that link that's not on the website. It was sent to you an email. If you don't have that and you think you registered, jump into the help desk. Otherwise, live curious, keep learning. Thanks again, Will, for everything you did. That was a great provocation, and look forward to continuing to work in our region. Have a wonderful day.